Our first storyteller of the evening is going to be Dr. Helen Grace Ryan, and she's our Vice President of Student Affairs. So everybody give Helen Grace a warm welcome.
Thanks for having me. I was volunteering at the Franciscan Kitchen. For those of you who haven't been there, the Franciscan Kitchen is basically what it sounds like. A food kitchen in downtown Louisville run by the Franciscans. The patrons come in, go through a line, sort of like a cafeteria. Then they sit in these really tight rows of tables to eat. They're tight as we try to accommodate as many people as possible. My job that day was not on the food line though. With a pitcher in my hand, my job was to go from table to table, greeting the guests, refilling their water glasses, after they had gone through the meal line. My job was to make small talk and visit with them. This particular morning, the room was packed. I'd guess 100 people, mostly all men, who were living on the streets were there. And sadly, you could tell many had it very rough. By looking at them, they had on clothes that they'd worn for several days, if not longer. As I weaved from table to table, checking on the guests and filling their glasses, there was this man. He kept studying me, and I use the word study, not look, but study. Studying me to the point of making me feel uncomfortable. I could feel his eyes on me from across the room. He was watching me go from table to table. He was in his 20s or 30s, smaller in stature, but sturdy. And I became afraid. I did not know this guy. So my first tactic was to ignore him. I tried not to make eye contact, though I could feel his eyes on me, and I just kept refilling the drinks. Then I tried avoidance, going to other tables away from him, busying myself. Then it happened. Suddenly, I found myself right beside him. My water pitcher was empty and I needed a refill. He used that opportunity to corner me at the sink as I was stuck, and he immediately started talking. He told me he'd been looking for me, and he hadn't seen me in forever. I could tell he was sure in his mind he knew who I was. I responded he must have had me confused. I had never volunteered at the kitchen before. I wondered then if he had some sort of ploy. He then asked me if I lived at the corner of Westport Road and Hurstbourne Lane, and I fell silent. At this point, you could have knocked me over with a feather. I felt lightheaded, and my mind began to race. How did he know where I lived? We were miles from there. We were downtown. Then he asked me if I had a little girl. I immediately thought of my little Lucy B. He said she looks just like me. This did not help. I did not like where this conversation was going at all, and my mind continued to race. I did not know him. He went on to tell me he knows me because I bring my little girl to Steak and Shake off Westport Road. I always go through the drive-thru, and I get my little girl a milkshake and me a Diet Coke. He said, "No food, just shakes and a drink." He continued to say I always smile at him, and that my little girl sits in her booster seat from the back and smiles at him too. He said he remembers our smiles, and he said he remembers that we both smile, and he said it had been months since he'd seen us, and it had. He did know me. At that moment, I knew him too, but not really. A million images rushed through my mind. How many times had I seen that man? And how many times have I interacted with someone and my interactions meant nothing to me, but something to them? And then I thought, how did Lucy B know to smile? He told me that I had seen him, and he told me that I'd be amazed at the people who do not see him. And when I asked him his name, he told me it was pride. I felt a lump in my throat and a pit in my stomach, and I didn't know whether to cry or throw up. I'd never imagined how invisible he must feel, but in that moment I sort of felt it. There are times when you feel God is right there in the room with you, and I've had a couple of those moments, thankfully, in my life. Theologians call those moments thin places, when the membrane between heaven and earth is so thin You can maybe hear the angels and they can hear you. It's when the Spirit draws you closer and you know you're in the presence of something greater. I grew up going to church. I still go to church, and I would consider myself both spiritual and religious. This interaction reminded me of the Road to Emmaus Bible story. Basically, in that story, there's a man walking from Emmaus to Jerusalem, and it's a long walk between the two cities. The whole time, the man is going on and on and on about Jesus. Have you heard about Jesus? What about Jesus? He didn't know the man walking beside of him was Jesus. It wasn't until they all sat down for dinner and he looked at the man and he just knew, oh, that's Jesus. I truly believe that there are always angels among us, but I wonder how many times have I missed the angels? I've replayed that moment of holding that picture at the sink a dozen times, if not more. I think about what a loss it would have been if I avoided pride, or had been rude or confrontational, or stopped with the water altogether and hid in the back of the kitchen until he left. Man, what I would have missed. I'm so thankful I was gentle. I'm so thankful I was open. And I'm so thankful that he let me see. And I'm so thankful that pride was gentle too. He could have kept all of that to himself, but he wanted me to know and to share. And mostly, I am thankful that pride saw me.